Good morning once again, and my name's Kathy Wesley, and I'm the resident teacher of Columbus Karma Take Some Choling, the Tibetan Buddhist Meditation Center in Columbus, Ohio. It's been a year, hasn't it, for everyone? It's been a year. It's been what was the Dickensian beginning of the Tale of Two Cities? It's been the best of times. It's been the worst of times, and I think all of us are feeling somewhat sad for the year that we lost, and also not just that, but the people who are no longer in our lives who passed away because of the pandemic. And I think all of us, our hearts go out to all of those who have suffered so much physically, emotionally, economically during this time. And I just wanted to start by thinking and um, sending out an aspiration for all of those who have suffered during this period, and making the aspiration that all of them are freed from suffering and come to happiness, and then to a spiritual awakening that gives them strength through all their life. Um, I want to thank all of you for donating to the Columbus Karma Take Some Cholings Rebuilding Fund. All of the funds above the cost of providing the Eventbrite service, all of the costs above that, or all of the proceeds beyond that, will go to the Columbus KTC's Rebuilding Fund. At the beginning of the afternoon session, I'll give you a short update on the Columbus KTC's building project, and that way you can see a little bit, a few of our pictures and so on, see how we've been doing rebuilding the center that was damaged by fire. So the history of today's program is that I was due to give a Zoom program this weekend for the congregation and students at the Southern Dharma Center in the Carolinas, and sadly, I was unable to do that because there were not enough registrations. And I felt badly about not being able to provide some kind of programming on this weekend, since for many people it's a 3-day 4th of July holiday weekend. So I decided to go ahead and just book a short and sweet 1-day retreat on the same topic that I was going to share at Southern Dharma. And the topic was how to transform mindfulness practice into a path of compassion. The reason I wanted to talk about mindfulness was because so many people are practicing mindfulness meditation now. I guess you could say we're having a moment. Meditation is having a moment. And lots of people, both in religious circles, but also in everyday life and in business, schools, organizations, are learning the techniques of mindfulness meditation. And they're doing it to improve the businesses, say it improves productivity. And people in the mental health professions say it promotes a sense of well-being. So for lots of reasons, mindfulness is having a moment of exposure and popularity. This moment may be gone in a moment, but while we're here in the moment, it's probably worthwhile discussing what mindfulness is, where it comes from, and how we can use it in our everyday life to make a change in our everyday thinking, make a change in our everyday behavior, and then eventually begin to take on better behaviors that will actually benefit us more. But I'll get into those topics as the time wears on. But that's a little bit about how this program came about. And I want to thank the members and friends of the Columbus, Ohio Karma Take Some Choli Center for allowing me to use their Zoom in order to offer this program. I see that a lot of my friends, Dharma friends here, are from the Columbus KTC, although I also see folks from the West Coast, from Santa Monica KTC, Erie, Ann Arbor, and elsewhere. So I want to thank all of you for being here. We could, one of the things we could do at the outset here would be to collect a little bit of information, because I'm going to do either a hand raise, or not everyone is on video. So I think is there a little hand raise function in the Zoom box? Where is it? Okay, it's in the participants box, if I remember correctly. And just to see how many people already have established a daily practice of meditation. Do we have like lots of folks? Yeah, daily practice. Oh, cool. Okay, good. So lots of you have established a daily practice of meditation. Okay, great. I appreciate you checking in on that. So this means, what this means then is that I'm speaking to a group that already has some appreciation for what meditation is, what it does, and how it can change our experience of life. So knowing that, that's a good start. And so if anyone would like to, I'm going to ask the host momentarily to unmute us, because I want people to let me know if there's anything in particular that they would like to learn today. If there is anything in particular they want to make sure that they come away with from today's program. You can unmute or type into chat, your choice.
Hi there, it's Kyla. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Thanks.
I would say, I've been reading about reactivity, and when you're in that moment and you're feeling an emotion and you're out in public or you're having a face-to-face, it's one thing when I'm in my house, but when I'm out, it would be helpful to have some more insight into how to not fly off and with the emotion and be able to feel better.
I can really empathize with that. I've always had a temper and this kind of thing, and so I experience a lot, and I also experience a lot of anxiety. So I tend to talk a lot, and both of these things can really get in the way of conversation, and they can really get in the way of communication, conversation, and relationship. And it also can make us kind of like not feel good about ourselves. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and I've got it on my list, my to-do list. Thank you for sharing about that. And Kyla, where are you from?
I'm Westerville. I'm here.
Hey, thanks for joining. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else have something they'd like to share? Sally, then Barbara.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, something that goes through my mind is, I guess, in terms of being compassionate and acting, and my tendency is always to feel I don't even quite know how to put the question, but to feel like what I'm doing is never really enough. And I don't think that's at all realistic. And I think a lot about the small actions being valuable. But my other mind tells me, pokes at me a lot. And then, so I think about that. What's an appropriate actions? Enough is enough, and
yeah,
can do.
I really do appreciate that. And in fact, Sally, what's interesting is that while you're speaking, Rebecca also shared that she would like to have advice on expanding the practices into our everyday conversation and talk. And I think that's really, really, I think that's a really important thing. And what you're talking about here is that one of the things, the feeling that one cannot ever do enough. And what I'm wondering is some of these feelings come from our past and from the coping behaviors that we developed as youth when we were younger. And some of those coping behaviors have outlived their usefulness, but we still do them anyway. And some of them are habitual, and they're difficult to change because they're habits. But I do think that there is a good thing inside always wanting to do more. There's like a good impulse there, but we have to tame the impulse and And it's like a horse, you know, untamed, a horse cannot do very much, but they can actually be our friends and help us to accomplish things. And so our habits, if we can aim them in a proper direction and put them to good use, then they can actually be beneficial for us. So I'll definitely address that. I put it on my list. Thank you, Sally. I'm sorry. Somebody's okay. Okay, got it. Barbara, you are next, and I see Matthew is also has something to ask. Did you want me to read yours off of the chat, Matthew, or do you want me to get?
Fine.
Okay, very good. All right, thanks very much. So Barbara, you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to really thank you for doing this today because I had signed up for the Southern Dharma weekend. I was excited when I saw you on their website. I was a member for some time there with you in Columbus, and then now I've retired and moved back to Milwaukee. So this is a treat for me. And I found I guess I had a real split during this whole pandemic year about compassion.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes I had really an abundance of it for what everyone was going through. And then
Mhm.
other times I had a very impatient
Mhm.
intolerance that I couldn't work it up.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe the COVID and politics fed into that too, but
Mhm.
it was something I observed in myself during the past year. So
Mhm. Oh,
I'm here to
yeah.
learn whatever I can.
Say that again, please. Say that again.
I'm here to learn whatever I can.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, boy, that's the truth. And it's really interesting that you should say that, Barbara. And by the way, thanks for being our long distance Dharma friend in Milwaukee. So thank you. And while you were speaking, or right before you spoke, Caitlin was sharing. It says, the more I practice meditation, the more I notice shortcomings in myself and ways in which I can do better. Do you have any suggestions for improving self-compassion? And I think that's an excellent, that's kind of dovetailed with what you're talking about, Barbara, because there are times when we feel like our life is very progressive and we feel like we're making progress in life. And there are other times when we feel like we're regressing and not doing what we would like to do or being who we'd like to be. And I think that the stress of the last year has really been tough. It's been tough for everyone. And it has affected us in ways that we are not really even aware of yet. Because for almost 15 months, we were in it, so to speak. We were in the midst of a feeling of fear and crisis and the illness of our loved ones, the deaths of people we know. It was a very, very stressful period in so many ways. And I think that we're only just beginning to integrate all that. And what it seems to me, just based on my own experience, it's actually somewhat like yours, Barbara, in that I had times when I felt a lot of compassion for people, and there were times when I felt fearful or anxious or angry, and sometimes all of those at once. And as a result, my experience of meditation was not what it had been, and so forth and so on. But I think over time, I've been able to see a little bit more of my habits, which is kind of what Caitlin was referring to in her question, because a lot of where we are in life has to do with the habits we have formed. And the habits, some of our habits are good habits and some of our habits are bad habits. And so, like, how do we work with our habits? And how do we feel about our habits? Because there's like the habit, but then there's also how we feel about the habit. And so there's a couple of different layers of ways that we can work with our mind, not just the habit itself, but how we feel about it and how that affects our self-identity and so on. So I'm looking forward to talking about mindfulness and how mindfulness sort of cuts through those layers and allows us to see things, and then how compassion practice helps us to change things. So mindfulness is about seeing things and compassion is about changing things. So really looking forward to that. And so thanks for those questions. And then Matthew's question is, he would like to have a review of the 4 stages of shamatha. Yes, we can definitely do that as part of the second half of the morning today. Waterfall, river, ocean, etc. Found a gap in my notes from several months ago. Oh, yes, no problem. And I will put, I'll see if I can't find I have a PDF that illustrates this. I'll use it as a visual aid during the program today, but I will also try to upload a copy of it to the online event page on Eventbrite so that folks can download it later. Even if they can't get it today, they could get it tomorrow or the next day, because that event will remain up for a while. And then when you get your follow-up email, the link to it will be that, and the video will both be in there. So we got you covered. Well, because of time, I only have time for one more question. Is there another question out there, or another thing that you'd like to make sure you bring back from today? Okay. Well, then we'll go ahead and get started on the program. Because I'm coming from a Buddhist background and I'm sharing teachings from the Buddhist tradition, I'm going to start by reciting a short prayer. If this is a prayer with which you are familiar, you can join in. And if not, you can join in your heart and in your mind, thinking that you dedicate this session to all sentient beings. In the Buddha, his teaching, and the order most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. Through the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may we attain Buddhahood for the sake of all that lives. Now the 4 immeasurables. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from that great bliss, which is freedom from suffering. May they dwell in great equanimity, free of attachment and aversion to those near and far. And finally, a short prayer to the masters of the lineage. Palden Sawe Lama Rinpoche, Dagi Chiwar Pede Den Shala, Kadran Chemboko Neche Sunde. Okay, I don't have a translation for that last one, but it's something like kind root lama seated above my head on a lotus flower. Please grant me the blessing of your body, speech, and mind. So it's like that. So mindfulness meditation. Well, Buddhists did not invent mindfulness meditation, but Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, I guess you could say he was the first, an early adopter of mindfulness meditation, and an early proponent of mindfulness meditation. 2,500 years ago in India, he attained a spiritual awakening, and during his spiritual awakening, he came to understand the nature of mind and the nature of perception, the nature of experience, and everything that has to do with the mind. And because of this, he was asked to teach. And when he gave his initial teaching, he expressed what came to be known as the 4 Noble Truths: that suffering's part of life, suffering has a cause, suffering has a solution, and there is a path that leads to the end of suffering. If we think about all the great religious faiths and philosophies in the world, they're all about the problem of suffering. So in this way, the historical Buddha Shakyamuni was no different than any other philosopher or religion or proponent of religion who's been walking through history with us. Suffering is part of life. It has a cause, it has a solution, and there's a path. And when he talked about suffering, the Buddha basically said suffering is an endemic part of being a being in this life. Whether we're an animal or a bird, or whether we are living on the earth, below the earth, above the earth, wherever we are, we experience some kind of suffering because we have bodies that convey pain, and we have minds and emotions that can convey painful emotions, and so on. And so because of this, suffering is woven into the fabric of being a human being in this world. But many of us don't realize that. And we think that suffering is something that we can perhaps like give to someone else. Perhaps we think that suffering is something we don't need and don't deserve. And in fact, maybe it was misdelivered to us by accident somehow. But the Buddha said, if we can set aside those notions, we will suffer less. We will have less suffering. We may still have physical, mental, emotional suffering, but if we let go of our beliefs that, number one, suffering should not be part of our life. Number two, that was probably a mistake. We shouldn't have gotten this suffering. And number three, perhaps we can give it to someone else. That if we can let go of these notions, that in some way we'll be able to experience less suffering in our life. But the Buddha said not only is suffering part of life, it actually does have a cause. And the cause is not external forces. It's not the neighbor. It's not the boss. It's not the circumstances. It's actually our own interior grasping and clinging and fixation, thinking my life needs to be, and then you fill in the blank. My life needs to be perfect. My life needs to be comfortable. My life needs to be carefree, and so on. And so when we fill in that blank, we create an expectation that we then cling to, which then causes suffering. And so the cause of suffering, again, is only, it doesn't really have anything to do with external forces, but how we individually respond to those things. Grasping and clinging. We can grasp onto so many things, but the thing we seem to grasp onto the most is our sense of me or I. We grasp onto the me and the I, and we hold onto it for dear life. And because of that, we tend to view the entire world from a very self-centered perspective. Who are our enemies? Well, we have to subdue those. Who are our friends? We have to cultivate those. And so in trying to control our reality, we build what one of the great Buddhist masters of the 20th century called, we build a kingdom of ego, in which our self-centeredness is actually the monarch. And so building this palace or this kingdom of ego, we then look at things from a very self-centered perspective. We might think we're the best and that everyone should respect us. But we could also just as easily think we're the best at being the worst and we don't deserve anything. So both of these are self-fixation, but they appear in different costumes. But both of them, whether we think we're the best or we think we're the best at being the worst, they still have to do with self-grasping and self-fixation. And in that way, they're part of this cause of suffering. But good news, the Buddha did not just teach the first two of the Four Noble Truths. I'm really grateful that he didn't, because if he didn't, we would have nothing to talk about today. He didn't just say suffering's part of life, and it's because of clinging, and you spot it, you got it, and that's it. Thank you. He didn't do that. He actually said, because he pursued some logic. He said, because suffering has a cause, and the cause is grasping, there is a solution to suffering. That's the third noble truth. And that solution is letting go. Because if the problem is grasping, the solution is letting go. Just that simple. However, it's not that simple because of all of our habits of thinking. And therefore, we need the fourth noble truth, which is the path. We need a path that leads us and guides us out of self-fixation and into freedom and letting go. This morning, as I was preparing for today's talk, I was reflecting on the fact that this is being offered on the Independence Day weekend. So the irony of this is not lost on me, that we're talking as a civic society, we're talking about the early Americans' freedom from Great Britain, But here we are now in our current lives talking about freedom from fixation and so on. And so I guess you can say we have a little bit of tendril, what the Tibetans call tendril, which is auspicious connection. And this auspicious connection is allowing us to learn about how to find freedom for ourselves. Now, in the Eightfold Noble Path that the Buddha described in the Fourth Noble Truth, he talked about right intention and right thinking and right speech, right action, right livelihood, and right meditation, and so on. He talked about all of these, but they can be boiled down to 4 statements. Do no harm whatsoever, practice virtue as much as you can, and tame your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So if we take away that last one, which is just a statement of summary, do no harm means to not harm yourself and not harm others. Do as much benefit as possible means to take care of yourself and benefit others. And tame the mind, it means to cultivate mindfulness, to cultivate meditation, so that you can learn how not to harm others and how to not harm yourself and how to benefit others and how to benefit yourself. So in that way, the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha point to our problem in life, which is suffering. Show us the cause, show us the solution, and then show us the path. So now I'm going to take from those 3 statements, do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. I'm going to go with tame your mind. We're going to talk about that for a minute. We all have a lot of habits that we have in this world. And we have a lot of, and some of them are good, some of them are not good, but all of them come from within us. And according to the teachings of Buddha, they're all rooted in self-fixation. Earlier, I was sharing that I tend to be anxious and talk a lot to help me with my anxiety. But what's interesting is that that's not a really helpful habit sometimes because it shuts down conversation and communication with other people. But it is what I tend to do. So a lot of the habits that we have come from our fear, our self-fixation, and our fear. And so we have to find a way to work with the self-fixation so that the fear can be reduced. And some folks experience anger. They say, I have a hot temper. And what will happen is that they will be very reactive when somebody says something that does not match with their experience or match with what they think should be happening. And so in that way, we have habitual ways of thinking about ourselves. We have habitual ways of thinking about the world, and these make it difficult for us to work with our root emotions of fear or anger or feeling badly about ourselves. We have a very difficult time. So the practice of mindfulness helps us to, I guess you could say, peel away the outer layers and allow the mind to rest. A lot of folks, when they learn the practices of meditation, they talk about their mind being like a monkey going from place to place to place to place, to place to place to place to place, and just kind of bouncing around, and so forth and so on. And so as a result, we are sort of baffled. We don't know what we are thinking. And we don't know what to do in a given situation. And so these are what the Buddha called the 3 poisons: attachment, ignorance, and bewilderment, and aversion. And so if we could find a way to gain relief from all of this thinking, all of this sort of monkey mind jumping, then we would be able to experience ourselves in a different way. And so in this way, we have to have some type of technique in order to be able to work with our mind, because we're actually really smart and our thoughts are always with us, and we can't imagine not working with our thoughts or not having thoughts. And so the whole meditation thing seems a little mysterious. And so in the Tibetan tradition, they boil meditation instruction down to 2 points: body at ease, mind at ease. And body at ease and mind at ease consist of providing a basic framework that is very simple, a very simple posture for putting the body at ease, and a very simple technique for putting the mind at ease. So by applying a simple posture and a simple attention technique, we put the body at ease and the mind at ease. How we do this is known by many, and from the looks of it, it's known by most folks in this group. And that is, if you, in fact, we could try a little bit of this right now. If you're sitting in a chair, I'll give you a brief review of the posture of meditation. If you're sitting on the floor, wherever you're sitting, I can give you a brief review. Body at ease consists of being able to sit on either a chair, a kneeling bench, a cushion, or if you have back trouble, some people actually have to lie down to meditate. But in whichever of these you use, you can place the body in such a way that the center of your center of gravity is balanced over your spine. And it's some people who are yoga practitioners will remember your yoga teacher saying to you, think that you have a string out the top of your head, and then let your spine settle into a straight, and yet with its natural curves, place. So we'll start building our meditation posture from the bottom up. If you're sitting in a chair, place your feet flat on the floor, and your feet can be hip width apart. So they're in line. So your feet are in line with your hips. And those of you and you might actually have to sit a little closer to the edge of your chair to do that, because your legs should have, here's your hips, here's your knees, here's your feet. You should have that nice 90-degree angle. If you are sitting on the floor, on the other hand, you will need to sit cross-legged in one of many different postures. You could sit with the legs crossed lightly in front of you. You could sit with one leg on top, one foot on top of the other. Or you can, if you're an athlete, left foot on right thigh, right foot on left thigh, and sit in what is called the lotus posture in yoga, or the Vajra posture in Tibetan tradition. So my teacher advised people against trying to sit in the lotus posture unless they were really, really good at it. He said, because otherwise you will have difficulty being distracted from the pain. So his advice was to start with a very simplified sitting posture. So that's a discussion of what to do with your legs. The seat, my teacher said that in Tibet, they used to use the rule of 4 finger widths. Get it? 4 widths of your finger. And that would be the ideal cushion. Your 4 finger widths would be your ideal cushion. My 4 finger widths is my ideal cushion. But for those of us who are not used to sitting on the floor, we may need 8 finger widths high cushion in order to feel comfortable and cross our legs properly. So we need to have a good cushion. And if you're sitting on a chair, that means to sit on the part of the chair so that your back is not curved and that your back is straight. So then the back itself needs to have its nice curves. One of my friends who's a martial arts instructor said you can arch your back, and so that it's really uncomfortable. and then gradually reduce the curve until you feel balance and comfort in your spine, which I think is kind of a cool thing. And so that's how to work with the spine. The shoulders can be straight, but not hunched. In order to accomplish this, you can place your hands palm downward on your legs. You can do this if you're sitting in a chair or if you're sitting on the floor. Palm downward. My teacher said we're grounding ourselves. We're not like trying to receive something from the universe. So our hands are actually down, because this is about grounding ourselves. My teacher also taught a special posture that he said came from Tibetan yoga, where you touch your thumb to the base or the first joint of your of your ring finger, of your ring finger, and then you close your hand in a light fist. Base or first joint of the ring finger, close your hand in a light fist. You're not grasping, you're just allowing it to rest. And then you rest these on top of your legs. He called it making the lion's paw, because it kind of looks like that. The benefits of this, he said, come from the Tibetan yoga and health tradition, where he says it promotes good movement of energy in the body. I don't know much about that, but I do know that it keeps your hands warm. So in a cold room. So then now we have the legs, the seat, the back, the shoulders, hands, and arms. Then the chin can be tucked in slightly, making a small double chin. And this straightens the neck vertebrae. Then the eyes, you have a couple of choices. With your gaze, you could gaze downward a few feet ahead of you, and you're gazing and not looking. You're not like counting the fibers in the carpet or the grains in the wood. You're just allowing your vision to soften and expand to include everything in front of you. But you're not putting any mental effort into what you're doing. You're not saying that is a wall, that is the floor. It's just allowing your gaze to rest. Some folks have trouble with their eyes during meditation. And I talked to His Eminence Tai Rinpoche, who's one of the meditation masters of the lineage, of our lineage, Karma Kaji lineage right now. He said that if you have trouble with your eyesight or things bothering you, he said it's all right to close your eyes when you meditate. You don't have to keep them open. He said, but you should be aware that you might fall asleep. And he said that's not the worst thing that could happen. But he says if your visual intake distracts you, then you can close them lightly. So this is a summary of the posture. The legs, the seat, the shoulders, hands, and arms, the back, the chin, the gaze, and there's one more, also from the Tibetan medical and yoga tradition. You can touch the tip of the tongue to the upper palate behind the front teeth. You just touch it. And then you can let your face muscles relax, because that's what this does. And it also prevents a lot of swallowing while you're meditating. So, and Khenpo Rinpoche said it helps with the relaxation of the face. It also helps with energy movement in the body and so on. So he said that's something that you can try. And if it's uncomfortable and you can't do it, no problem. So that's a little bit about placing the body at ease. Placing the mind at ease means to place your attention on a single thing. And that single thing that most of us choose to place our attention on is breath. So we think, so we place our attention on the breath as it comes in and goes out. But you could just as easily choose a mental object. I have my meditation gong here. You could place your attention on a physical object that you place on the table in front of you. Your eyes can look at it for a very long time, but your attention may not be able to be with it the entire time. And so in order to practice this technique, we make the aspiration when we first sit down that we are going to practice meditation for the benefit of beings. That's our mental intention that we start our practice with. And then we think, I will be doing breath awareness for the next few minutes, and I will do my best to follow breath awareness. And then we can start by taking one deep breath through the nostrils if possible, and through the mouth if you're congested. And imagine that breath drops to the bottom of our body, and then breathe out also through the nose. And then we allow the breath to come and go naturally, following the feeling of the breath as it enters and leaves the body. You can even count if this is helpful, but you don't have to. In breath, out breath, mentally count 1, in breath, out breath, mentally count 2, and so on. Easy number to go to is number 7. You can go to 7 again and again and again. And so I think we're going to try it. We're going to try a short meditation. And oh, by the way, there is one more thing. Many people ask, well, what do I do if I get distracted while I have placed my attention in meditation? And for that, there's a technique that one teacher called touch and go. I call it touch and let go. And so what happens is that when we're doing the technique, we're watching the breath, or watching the object, and then our attention wanders. And the moment we notice it, there's this moment my friend Julie, the brain researcher, calls the oops moment, when you say, oops, I'm not watching. And so at that moment, you think, or you consciously say to yourself, I'm thinking, and you can then let go of whatever you're thinking about. You can say thinking, let it go, and then return your attention to the technique and think of it as a fresh start. Think, okay, I'm starting over now. And so in that way, that oops moment turns into a technique, dropping and returning. So now I think we're ready to do a short session of sitting, placing the body in our comfortable posture, thinking I'm going to meditate for the benefit of sentient beings, and starting with one deep breath, breathing out, and then allowing the breath to come naturally and go naturally. We'll sit for a short time. Okay. That was a pretty short session, but I figured that since our time together today is a little bit short, that that I would do a shorter session, shorter sessions for this part. Does anybody have questions about the technique or about the touch and let go or the returning or any of those aspects of the mindfulness practice? And if you can ask about this, or if you have some questions in general about meditation, you can ask them now. You can either, I think you can type them into chat. Yeah, you can type them into chat, or you can unmute your microphone and ask. Who has a question? Does anyone have a
Hi,
question?
Lama Kathy, it's Matthew here.
Yes, Matthew.
So on the touch and go portion, after we've noticed the distraction, we're returning back to the breath. What role does self-compassion play in that moment? So we're not getting frustrated at ourselves because
Right.
we've allowed ourselves to become distracted.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you asking about this, because what I've noticed when teaching meditation, and part of the reason that I added the instruction of being of sort of being gentle in the process and seeing the process as being a fresh start. That section, that part where you have let go of the distraction and you've returned your attention, and then you've restarted the practice. Think of it as a fresh start. That's part of the whole idea of self-compassion, because what I think happens when we place our attention somewhere, what we'll get is we'll get a short period of attention. But that short period of attention will always be followed by a period of mental wandering. Okay, so what we do when we place our attention on something is we'll get a short period of attention, and it'll be followed by a period of mental wandering. So our job as the meditator is to notice when we have transitioned from that short period of attention into the period of wandering. And our job is to try to make that period of wandering, as short as we feasibly can given the circumstance. If we've had a really bad day, then it might be very difficult for us to return, but we should still try. And I think that understanding and setting our expectations at the beginning is really important. Otherwise, we will get frustrated. But if you know that the process is short period of attention, always followed by a period of wandering, or pretty much always followed by a period of wandering, then it's all about being present during the attention, the placement of attention, and then being aware of the wandering and getting hold of the mind. You can even label what's going on, thinking, and then you can let it go and then return the attention to the breath for a fresh start. So if your expectations are set so that there will be mental wandering, then it's not such a big deal. If you know there's going to be wandering and you say, okay, I'm just going to make sure that wandering is shorter. And then actually it'll work a whole lot better. You'll be less frustrated, and you'll feel sorry about that. I had a technical glitch at my end. I love my internet service. I just have to say I love my internet service, but sometimes it fails me. And I see now that the reason it failed me is that I'm on the wrong channel. So stand by with me for just 1 minute. So I hope that helps, Matthew. Does that help some? Okay, great. Other things that people might want to know. Let's see what's in chat. What's over in chat? Let's see. Hang on a minute. How do you prevent falling asleep? Oh gosh, yeah. Okay. Okay. my teacher, Kempo Karthar Rinpoche, gave a couple of what he called remedies for these things. He says, if sleepiness is your problem, he said, there's several things you can do. Number one, it actually, he said, don't meditate too close to your meal, eating your lunch or breakfast or whatever. Don't try to meditate too close to that, because your body's busy digesting and you might fall asleep while you're doing that. So he said, try to not eat heavy food, like oily food or whatever before you meditate. And then he said that another thing you could do is, he says, sometimes if your body's too warm, you'll fall asleep. So he said you could open a window or put a fan on and give yourself a breeze. Or if you're wearing a sweater, take the sweater off, that kind of stuff. And then he also gave a visualization you could use. And the visualization for sleepiness, he said, is to cast your gaze upward and outward away from you, almost like on a diagonal. And he said, you can see a shaft of light leading away from you that goes up into the sky. And he says, and you can imagine that your breath comes out and goes up into that shaft of light and then comes back and illuminates your body with light. And he said, you would only do this as long as you need to in order to calm the sleepiness. And so that would be something you could do to do that. So again, keeping yourself physically cooler, not eating heavy food before, and maybe giving yourself a breeze, and then using the visualization. These are things that can help with the sleepiness. I don't know, I hope that was helpful to you. Was that useful? Carla? Okay, great. She's good. Hey, all right. All right. Thanks very much. Okay. Any other questions that people might have?
How about like on a daily basis, time spent meditating?
Sure. Sure. And by the way, before I forget, there's actually another set of remedies. I better teach them now, and then I'll get to your question. Sorry about that. But what if you have the opposite problem and you have a lot of busy monkey mind? I love what Mingyur Rinpoche says about the monkey mind. One of the best ways to deal with it is to give the monkey a job. And the job is watching your attention and helping to usher you back to your breath. But if your mind is very busy and you're having difficulty, Rinpoche says the opposite things of dispelling sleepiness will work for you. In other words, you can eat slightly richer food before you sit and meditate. That's one. You can warm yourself up and so forth. Instead of cooling yourself down, you warm yourself up. And the visualization is about casting your eyes downward. He said, you look down and imagine that there's a shaft of darkness going into the ground, and that your breath comes out and goes down into that shaft of darkness and then comes up. And this may sound weird, but he said it like illuminates your body with darkness. That's a little weird, but it's what he said. So, but he said, again, you only need to do this until the agitation is pacified. You don't have to do it for the whole rest of the session. So anyway, I just thought I would throw that in before I forgot that those are the two main problems a person can have, is sleepiness and agitation. Now, to get to your question about time, my teacher, Kempo Karthar Rinpoche, was very wise about this. He said that every person should start with a short period of time. He did not give a standard number, but from my point of view, a person could start with 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then do a little diagnostic work. Because what Kempo Rinpoche said to me is, he said, you'll notice that there are two styles of meditators. The first style of meditator, when they first sit down, everything is just like totally wild. They just have a hard time following the technique or getting the parts of the technique right or coming back, or they just have a real difficult time when they first sit down. He said that kind of person needs to sit for a longer period of time in order to outweight and to work with the agitation. So that person should sit for a slightly longer period. And I don't mean longer than 20 minutes. I mean, they should sit until they can get past that wobbliness. Second style of meditator is a person who, when they first sit down, everything is smooth. Everything is easy, very easy to do the practice, very easy to follow the technique. But the longer they sit, the more it breaks up, the more difficult it becomes. And Rinpoche said that person should sit for a shorter period of time, perhaps doing shorter mini sessions throughout the day, rather than trying to do a long session. He said the reason for this is, he says, these two types of people have to persevere and not get to the place where they feel frustrated. He says it's very important that you, and the ninth Karmapa even said this in one of his meditation manuals. He said, you have to leave your meditation session on good terms. You have to leave on good terms with your meditation. Don't try to force things too much so that you become really frustrated. And so that for the first style of meditator, that means outweighting the agitation and just applying technique, applying, returning until one gets to the place where the technique becomes smoother. And for that second style of meditator, it means quitting while you're ahead, and that and not getting to the point of frustration, and sitting more often in the day for these short periods will give you more of a feeling of satisfaction, and also will help you more than if you don't. Did that answer the question you had, Jim? That was your question, Jim?
Yeah, it was. And that does, yeah. And right now I start out agitated. It takes a while for it to settle down, and it varies how long it takes.
Yeah, no, I know. And one of the lamas told us when we were in a meditation workshop at our monastery at Karma Triana Dharma Chakra in upstate New York, he said, our problem as meditators, and he says, and we're all kind of beginners. Our problem is that we think that our meditation should be like one continuous upward movement and upward improvement. He said, when it's really more like the stock market, one day it's up, next day it's down, one day it's up, next day it's down, but the general trend is up, but it won't be a steady improvement every day. And he said, the reason for this was Ponlop Rinpoche saying this. He said, the reason for this is because our body and our mind are actually different day to day and moment to moment. And so because of that, our physical body may be ill on one day or unsettled one day, or maybe we didn't get enough sleep or enough to eat, or we have something bothering us, so our body and mind are going to be different from day to day. And that's why there's so much difference from day to day in the meditation. So yes. And the other thing is that gentleness, applying that gentleness when you have to return, when you notice distraction, label it, let it go, and return. Try to apply that with as much gentility as you can. And this will, and recognize that attention, you're trying to cultivate attention, and your goal is to make that attention like 1 second longer, and the distraction 1 second shorter. And if you can set a more realistic idea of what your meditation should be like, and that it's the practice of meditation, because we're all practicing the technique now, but we're not full meditators yet. We're just practicing the technique, but it will happen over time. Does that help, Jim?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. I realize I've run over the time here a little bit. Does anybody else have a Oh, I see. Sally's question is, would they have an all over goal of lengthening or shortening? You know, here's the deal. I think that if you're the first kind of meditator, you have to allow your session to be as long as it needs to be in order to work with the technique well. And if you're the meditator of the second type, where starts out great but breaks up, then you have to do more sessions, more short sessions during the days. But the goal would be to do more meditation all over, all over, to do a little more meditation. But you can't, but I'm warning people about this, because Khenpo Rinpoche has said on several occasions, he said, you should not try to force yourself to meditate, or force your meditation to be too long. He said, because that's kind of like bad. It's kind of like you're taking action against yourself and you're pushing yourself too hard. He said, when you press too hard on your mind, he said, you get a reaction from the mind. It will throw discursiveness at you. It'll throw lots of thoughts at you. The harder you try to control the mind, he said, it's actually going to rebel. So it's better to take a softer approach. So I hope that's helpful. Well, I apologize, but we're going to have to take our 5-minute break now. So because I did promise it, and I want to make sure we get it in. And then what we'll do when we come back is I'll talk a little bit about daily life applications, which will hopefully answer one of those questions from today, which is how to work with reactiveness. And so I'll see you in 5 minutes. It is now 14 minutes past the hour. So we will get together at 20 minutes past the hour. Okay, so I'll see you in just a few minutes.
Should I pause the recording?
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you coming back. I'm just looking at chat to see what's come up while I've been gone. Okay. All righty. So we've discussed, so far we've discussed a little bit about the basics of sitting meditation, and a little bit about the techniques, and a little bit about the goals. The goal of our sitting meditation is to have like a slightly longer period of attention, and a slightly longer period of attention, and a slightly shorter period of mental wandering. And what does this give us? This gives us something that is called mindfulness. And there are two aspects, two things that we're developing, two skills that we're cultivating. And one of them, this is according to the Tibetan tradition, and one is mindfulness, and which I misspelled there in the chat, and the other is alertness. Mindfulness and alertness. And so Drenpa and Seishin in Tibetan. Oops, can't spell. I can't spell Tibetan either. Uh-oh. So Drenpa is like mindfulness, and Seishin is alertness. And the reason I hold something in my hand as an illustration for this, and that's because in the traditional Tibetan elephant herding diagrams, there's a beautiful illustration of the 9 stages of shamatha. And it depicts a monastic chasing their mind in the form of an elephant. And they have 2 tools in their hand. They have a lasso, and they have an elephant hook. The lasso is mindfulness. The hook is alertness. And so what we're training in the practice of mindfulness is we're training our mindfulness, which is being able to keep our attention on the technique. In other words, being able to continue to apply the techniques all the way through. That's like a continuous thread. The technique is like a continuous thread. So that, like that lasso. And then alertness is what is the function of the mind that alerts us to being inattentive. In other words, we place our attention, and then that's the drenpa, the mindfulness. But then when we wander from it, it's sheishin, or our elephant hook of alertness that alerts us to the fact that we're no longer being mindful. And then we return our attention and reestablish mindfulness. So these are the two skills that we're learning on the cushion. Now, what's the benefits of these things, of these two things, mindfulness and alertness? Well, in general, the benefit that we receive from practicing mindfulness and alertness is that we can gradually come to know what is on our mind. In other words, at first, our minds are kind of chaotic, and we don't know what of the many thoughts in our mind that we should pay attention to. We have so much going on that we don't know who to pay attention to, and the chatter kind of gets us down and distracts us. But when we practice drenpa and sheishin, when we practice mindfulness and alertness, things slow down enough that we can begin to see individual thoughts as they arise and as they occur. And being able to do this gives us something we didn't have before, and that's choice. We have the choice as to which of these we're going to follow and which we're going to let go of. We don't have to see them all as being equal and be baffled by them all. We can slow the process down enough so that we can begin to see discrete individual thoughts and the little pathways that those thoughts will take us on. Those of you who are familiar with the modern meditation master, Mingyur Rinpoche, know about his teachings on rebirth. The Tibetans don't say reincarnation, they say rebirth. And he said, a lot of people think that rebirth only happens at the end of this physical human life. And that at that moment we go through a bardo or an in-between state, and then we take rebirth as another type of being. But he says we actually experience rebirth much more often than that, in that when we believe in a thought, we are reborn in the world of that thought. And we experience the world of that thought until that thought ends. And then we pass away from the life of that thought and into the next life of the next thought. And so this is why slowing down the process of thought and being able to see individual thoughts gives us more choice of where we want to be reborn in that next moment. And this is a very powerful thing, because before we saw our habits as being something that were unchangeable. And now we're beginning to see light in between those habitual thoughts and habitual reactions. We're beginning to see light in between them. And that gap between thoughts can become wider and wider and wider. And we can begin to slow down more and more and more in a conscious way, being able to look at our thoughts and make better decisions about where we're going to put our personal, mental, emotional, and spiritual energy. For example, before, maybe we were 5 minutes into telling someone off before we even knew we were angry. Now that we've become a meditator, we can see the anger coming. We can't necessarily stop it, but we can see it coming, which is an incredible advantage. Because then we can apply a technique that will help us in the moment with that reaction. And the quickest thing to do in the moment of reaction is just to breathe. Just breathe. And sometimes we would need to disengage from a situation briefly, or if we can't disengage from a situation to get some mental space, we can take mental space by quieting ourselves briefly, by not speaking, and by becoming aware of our breath, using the breath as an anchor in the moment of reactiveness, just becoming aware of our breath. In fact, a few of my friends who are counselors recommend a breathing exercise when people are being overcome by anxiety. They encourage their friends to breathe deeply and breathe out with slowness and concentration. My friend, the Tibetan doctor, Dr. Akhong Tara, he said you can do this by breathing in for a count of 5, holding for a count of 5, breathing out for a count of 5. And sometimes that will slow things down enough that you can change your reaction. Now, we may not be able to disengage in the moment in an angry conversation with someone, but if we can recognize at some point that we're feeling the pain and discomfort of a reactive emotion, we could say to the person we're talking with, I have to stop now. I have to stop now. I have to take a moment, and then I'll come back to this. Now, not everybody's going to have that luxury of being able to stop and then come back later. But if you can do it, it's very valuable. I know this may not be the answer to the question that you had earlier about reactiveness, but I'm hoping that it's at least a little bit helpful to know something you can do in that moment of reaction. And it comes to us, we get the capacity to work with our reactions because we've learned how to work with our thoughts, how to recognize them, how to touch them, how to let them go. You see, if you're in meditation and a thought comes and then you get angry, oh, thinking is bad, I don't want thinking, then you're sort of heaping more thoughts on top of the thought you already noticed. And so it might be better to take a slightly calmer approach and say, okay, that happened, thinking, let it go, and then return with a sense of gentleness. You will be practicing gentleness toward yourself when you do that. And so hopefully this will help with your development of mindfulness while you're on the cushion and your development of mindfulness when you're off the cushion. From time to time during the day, some people have little watch apps that will tell them to breathe. And they can take several mindful breaths. I'd take advantage of that if I were you. And if not, you can have an alarm go off at random times of the day, and then use that random moment to become aware of your breath and take 7 mindful breaths, or 5, or even 3, whatever you can do. And by doing that frequently throughout the day, you will interrupt this flow of habitual thoughts just for a moment. And this will also give you some breathing room on your reactiveness. Now, I want to talk about one more thing before we meditate again, and that's habits. We have a lot of habits, and right now we may think they can't be changed. Like, I will always be like this, or I will always be like that. But if we look at what happens in the practice of meditation, here we are in meditation, we're observing and being present with the breath. Here comes the breath coming in, going out, and we're being attentive. But that short period of attention is now ending because now a thought has arisen. Like, what are we going to do later today? And then, oh, I think I'd like to do this. And oh, I think I'd like to do that. And then suddenly the oops moment, my friend, Dr. Julie, talks about, oh, I'm not meditating. And then you say, okay, thinking and then you let it go, and then you return with gentleness to the breath for a fresh start. Now look what happened. Where did that thought go when you let it go? It just kind of disappeared, didn't it? And so this is actually a very encouraging thing to notice about your thoughts. When you let a thought go, it does just disappear, which means that it really was probably never very much of anything ever anyhow. It really wasn't earth-shatteringly important. It just kind of disappeared. And that gives us a perspective on our thoughts that we didn't have before. Before, we thought that every thought was like the universe speaking to us about something very important. But really, it's just another thought that we can touch and let go, and that disappears. And if we do that with one thought, that's a powerful thing. And if we continue to do it, that's a powerful thing. But look at it this way. What are our habits made of? Our habits are made of all those little thoughts that are nothing themselves and disappear. And so what this means is that potentially we can change any habit. Once we see that thoughts are discontinuous and nothing in themselves, that means even our worst habits are up for grabs and can be changed. Even our worst habits are discontinuous and can be changed. And so to me, that's the hopeful teaching about mindfulness. Yes, we can use mindfulness as a way of testing ourselves and a way of feeling better about ourselves. And like, I sat for longer today, or I had more attention today. It can become its own thing where we're competing with ourselves. Oh, did I get to a place in my meditation and so forth? We can use all of the unhelpful, habitual, self-clinging thoughts and that we use in our everyday life to be competitive with our friends and so forth, that we can become competitive with ourselves. Oh, I want to have better meditation, and I have great ambition for my meditation. We can make the same mistakes in meditation that we make in our everyday life. But if we can apply these techniques with some sense of gentleness and just this sort of gentle presence and gentle confidence in our capacity to practice, and gentle confidence in the impact of Dharma and impact of meditation, just gentle confidence that we will slowly improve. If we can do that, then that means that we can actually not just let go of bad habits in the moment by disengaging from them and going to our breath. I'll disengage from my bad temper or my anxiety by letting go of the situation and returning to my breath over and over again. I can do that, but I can also begin to take on new habits. And those new habits could be kinder and gentler to ourselves and others. And that's what we'll be talking about this afternoon session. Today, we talked about noticing habit. This morning, we talked about noticing habit through noticing our thoughts in meditation and being able to let go of our thoughts in meditation. And then this afternoon, we're going to build on that skill by taking on a discipline that's going to bring transformation and improvement to our life. Now, I see there's a question that's come up in the chat. Let's see. Is there a time when you are meditating and emotion repeatedly comes up that you embrace it, observe it, recognize it, to diffuse it by letting go? Sometimes it intensifies and wants attention. I think that this is an interesting topic because it talks about the fact that we have this feeling that emotions are somehow different than thoughts. And I'm going to try to explain something and see if this helps or not. The Buddha did not, in his teaching, differentiate between thoughts, feelings, emotions, perceptions. He called them all mental events. Mental events, which is kind of interesting. He sort of leveled the playing field and didn't say that emotions were better than thoughts or that any of those things. He kind of said they're all the same. So we've spent here in our society and world, we've given so much weight to emotions and thought of them as being so special that we do tend to give them more power. And so sometimes what will happen is a thought will come up and we'll just let it go, but an emotion comes up and we say, okay, like this is something I really have to pay attention to. So while part of our mind is trying to meditate, saying, oh, I have to let go. It's a mental event. I have to let it go. And we try. The other part of us is saying, no, we can't do that because emotions are really important. And so, and also besides that, there's also a physical component with emotion, because emotions become habituated in the body with feelings and physical sensations. Like we get cold when we feel fear, or we get hot when we feel anger. So because of this intimate relationship between mind and body, where the mind impacts the body and vice versa, we tend to give more weight to emotion for that reason. And so it could be that the emotion is separate from us, and the emotion is like another being and wants us to think about it. But it could also be that part of that the emotion is not a separate being, but actually is our own concern. Like, I really do need to deal with this emotion. This emotion is something that is a problem for me, and I really need to take time away from my meditation to deal with this emotion. And so I'm going to say both approaches are okay. Both approaches are okay. It's okay to notice an emotion, to label it thinking, to let it go, and then return to the breath for a fresh start with some kind of love and gentleness. But if the thought or emotion continues to return and continues to return and continues to return, it could be that we habitually feel that that emotion has not been healed or dealt with. And so there's a couple ways to go with that. This afternoon, we will learn a special technique for working with emotion. But this morning, we're going to use the mindfulness way of working with emotion. This afternoon, we'll use the compassion meditation method of working with emotion. But today, this morning, we're going to say, okay, I'm just going to breathe through this emotion. I'm just going to breathe, and I'm going to feel compassion for the emotion, and maybe this will help. And what you can do is notice this emotion later and begin to work with it later, either through journaling or through counseling, or whatever method is useful and healthy for you to work with the emotion. But sometimes it will come up when you're meditating, and you have the choice to try to breathe and let it go. But if it's really, really difficult, then you can dedicate the goodness of your meditation. We call it dedicating the merit in Buddhism. You can dedicate the goodness of your meditation, and then segue into journaling about your emotion, or talking to a friend, or in some way being able to work with the emotion at that. So there are, and then this afternoon we'll learn a whole different method for working with emotions, but I wanted to at least bring that up. Now we should sit for a moment. We'll do a slightly shorter sit, because after this, I want to go over the 4 stages of shamatha, because someone requested it, and it really is, it's a really lovely little teaching. And I'm looking up the PDF right now. now so that I have it ready. Yep, got it. Okay, all set. All right, so we'll place the body in the posture of meditation and make the mental aspiration that our meditation will be of benefit to ourselves and others. Placing the body in the posture of meditation, we take one deep breath, breathe out, and then allow the breath to come and go naturally. Placing our attention on the breath as it goes out and comes in. Noticing thoughts, labeling them thinking, letting them go, and then returning to the breath for a fresh start. We'll do that for just a few minutes. Okay. Thank you. I don't exactly understand this phenomena, but I can meditate with people on Zoom. I don't know what your experience is, but I think I can do it. What I'd like to do right now is to talk about how meditation progresses, because we start out where meditation is a real struggle. And then gradually, by being gentle with ourselves and patient with ourselves, and just continuing to notice thoughts, let go of thoughts, and return our attention to the breath. By doing this gentle technique over and over again, improvement can happen, and we can have slightly longer periods of attention and slightly shorter periods of wandering. But beyond that, there's actually more to talk about. I'm going to share with you this little handout that a friend of mine made based on the teachings of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche on the 4 stages of shamatha. Let's see if I can make it bigger. These come from his book, Dharma Paths. So if you have Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's book, Dharma Paths, these descriptions are in the book. The first stage of meditation is called waterfall. These all have to do with water, is the analogy. He says it's the first stage of meditation. There is tremendous activity going on in the mind, like water constantly pouring down in a waterfall. In other words, we have a lot of thoughts, and there's a lot of speed in the thoughts. So it's both volume, a lot of volume of thoughts, and a lot of speed. He said, don't feel discouraged or disappointed. Realizing that you have to work, meaning put effort into your practice, continue to practice without becoming annoyed or disappointed at the number of distractions. You should resolve to continue the meditation practice. Neither encourage the thoughts nor try to suppress them, but simply work on coming back to the breath. Rinpoche used another analogy one time when he was talking about, he said, don't imprison your mind. Don't hold your mind with so much force or tension that he says, because if you do that, you actually cause more thoughts. Then he used a kind of a silly example. He said, if your pet cat, if you think, oh, I'm going to control my pet cat by locking my pet cat in the closet, this is like not going to work. Because if you lock your pet cat in the closet, it will bounce off the walls trying to get out. However, if you open the door to the closet and make a nice little bed for the cat inside the closet, the cat may actually go into the closet and sleep peacefully. So the idea is, if we try to imprison our mind with force or tension, it's actually going to make more thoughts. But if we continue to use these techniques with gentleness, that gentleness is actually going to, I have a friend who's in business. He calls things a force multiplier, meaning that it makes something stronger. And so your gentleness, even though it sounds counterintuitive, your gentleness with the process and your patience with the process is actually going to strengthen your mindfulness and your alertness. And so if you have lots of thoughts and they're very speedy, guess what? You have arrived at the first stage of shamatha. So you can pat yourself on the back and give yourself an accomplishment sticker because you got there. Because if you notice that you're at the waterfall stage, that's awesome. It's awesome. It means that we have arrived at the first stage. The second stage of meditation is talking about the meandering river in a valley. So he says, at this second stage of meditation, sometimes the valley is wide and the ground is level, so the water runs smoothly. Sometimes there's a turn or the ground is uneven, So there is play and activity in the water. While thoughts are still arising and you still encounter distractions, they are not as frequent as at the beginning and not as gross or powerful. You are not so shaken by the distractions, but are able to come back to the breath quite easily. Sometimes you're able to follow the breath for some moments. You see, he says moments. He knows how short of a period this is. You're able to follow the breath for some moments without any distractions. Again, you're able to come back to a stretch of calm and tranquil mind, staying focused on the technique of following the breath. Khenpo Rinpoche chooses to use the word focus. I try never to use the word focus, and I try never to use the word concentrate when I teach meditation. And instead I say, place your attention. And by saying place your attention, there's more gentleness in that. Because what I tend to find is that people try to do what you tell them to do. So if you say focus, they're going to like focus, and it's going to be too much pressure, and they'll have more thoughts and they'll wonder what happened. So he says, again, if you're able to come back to a stretch of calm and tranquil mind, that's the second stage. So you might have had a few minutes or a few sessions of meditation where you have arrived at stage 2, and that's good too. Whoops. There we go. Okay, then the third stage of shamatha is called the ocean with waves. Ocean with waves is the third stage of meditation. While most of the time the ocean is tranquil, once in a while a large wave rises and then settles back into the ocean. For a time, the ocean takes a rest. After a while, another wave arises, and again it goes back into the tranquil ocean. At this third stage, you're able to maintain the awareness of following the breath most of the time, but once in a while there are some distractions. At this point, there is not so much shakiness or uncertainty in your meditation practice. You begin to feel a sense of confidence and trust in yourself and in the practice. So this is what the third stage of meditation is like. And then finally, the fourth stage is called the windless, waveless ocean. As you continue to practice the basic shine, the shine means calm abiding in Tibetan. Shi is peace and ne is abiding. So shine, calm abiding. Shamatha means the same thing in Sanskrit. As you continue to practice, the basic shine or shamatha meditation finally becomes stabilized and is likened to a windless, waveless ocean. No matter how long you meditate, you can sit without distraction. There may still come some subtle thoughts, but they do not take you away from following the breath. To reach this level requires consistent and diligent practice over a long period of time, going through the various stages. So that's a little bit about the 4 stages of shamatha. There are several methods of teaching or frameworks of teaching about shamatha. One divides the path of shamatha into 9 stages. This system divides it into 4. I think the 4 stages are a little easier to remember. And since they're associated with water, they're pretty easy to illustrate as well. So Matthew, did that help with your question about, okay, very good. All right, very good. Well, I can't believe it. We've actually come to the end of the morning session, and I covered all of the material I wanted to cover. I won't say it's unheard of, but I'm happy because we were able to talk this morning about why mindfulness is so popular right now and the basic techniques of mindfulness, how the practice of breath awareness or awareness of a visual object, how those techniques work. By noticing and letting go of thoughts, we establish a short period of attention and then gradually try to make it a few seconds longer. Working with thoughts and trying to work with thoughts with a sense of gentleness. By doing this, we develop 2 skills, Drenpa and Sheishin, mindfulness and alertness. and that mindfulness and alertness help us to notice our thoughts and be able to let go of our thoughts, both when we're in meditation and when we're not meditating. By anchoring ourselves in our breath, both on the cushion and off the cushion, when we feel reactiveness, off the cushion, if we take our attention to our breath and stay with it and disengage from our reaction, we can begin to calm and dampen our reactiveness a bit, which buys us more time to make better decisions about what to do in situations where we're reactive. Now, this afternoon, I'm going to start by talking about parade floats. So I hope you will come and listen to the talk about parade floats and how adopting thoughts can lead to emotional states, and how cultivating a specific emotional state, which is love and compassion, can help us with our reactiveness and help us transform our emotions. So that's what we'll talk about this afternoon. So I'm going to give you your lunch break now, and I will see you back here. Boone, would you be able to be here at maybe 5 minutes till the hour to start letting people in?
I think Kathleen is doing it.
Oh,
So
that's right, Caitlin, your afternoon. Would you be able to do that, sign on maybe 5 or 7 minutes early, and then just welcome people in? And then I'll be joining you somewhere around that time myself. So if you're leaving us for the day, thank you very much for being here. And we will send you the link to the YouTube video of this so you can see the afternoon session. And let's sit quietly for just a moment and mentally dedicate the goodness of this session. We dedicate the goodness of this session to all suffering beings, that they may understand suffering, its cause, its solution, and the path. And that by applying the techniques of mindfulness, they bring peace to their mind, to their family, and to the world. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you later today.